Well, good morning. Good morning. My name is Charles Berthiaume. I'm the president of the school, and we're lucky once again this year to have nice weather. I think we've had a pretty good run with all of our graduations. This is our 11th. It's hard to believe, our 11th graduation here at the LWT Technicum. On behalf of all of us at the school, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone here as we're gathered together to celebrate your achievements. And it's quite an achievement, guys, really. Now, a few of you have traveled a bit to get here. Let's see, we have some of you from New Jersey, some of you from Pennsylvania, and I'll move my way out. Maryland, Oregon, that's way out, Switzerland, and New York. Right? Did I forget anyone? Well, your presence here is clear evidence of your support of our school, our students, and our profession. Thank you all for coming. It's now my pleasure to begin the proceedings by introducing our first speaker. As we know, the LWT Technicum, or LWT, is an organization that's fully underwritten by Rolex. However, this is not totally about financials here. There are many intangibles that go into running a school, making it happen. And running a school is a concerted effort. And we are fortunate to have with us today, here from our headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland, someone who, along with his team, is committed to our efforts and whom we share an educational vision. Mr. Martin Parker, who manages Rolex World Service, represents 26 affiliates worldwide. As you can imagine, he has a very busy schedule. However, he's managed to squeeze us in against this year, thank you. And it's my pleasure. Martin's a friend, a colleague, and one of the school's biggest fans. And it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Martin Parker.
Ladies, gentlemen, dear graduates, distinguished guests, good morning. It's always a tremendous honor for me to be here at the LWT Technicum for the annual graduation ceremony. This year, as Chuck mentioned, we honor our 11th group of graduates. Quite an achievement. A proven track record has been created based on solid experience over the years, maintaining and indeed raising the standards in watchmaking training, constantly breaking new ground, quality at all levels being the key. Firstly, and most importantly, I would like to sincerely congratulate all of our 7 graduates here with us this morning for this very special occasion. Well done, guys. This is your special day and the culmination of 2 years of hard work and investment that I'm sure will show good returns over the coming years. We're all aware that your achievements are the result of hard work, focus, and dedication. Today, you should be very proud of yourselves. We're certainly very proud of you. Well done to each of you as you step into the world of watchmaking. Your passion and drive is clearly present, and your confidence will grow as each day passes. Be ready, however, to elegantly deal with any challenges that you may face as you move forward. Since our first graduation back in 2003, we now count more than 100 graduates, representing over 25 states in the USA. These capable watchmakers are now working all over the USA, but also in Canada, the Caribbean, and some even as far afield as Switzerland. This network of graduates is helping shape the future, and we're proud to see the achievements of each individual as our paths cross. On behalf of Rolex in Geneva, I would like to sincerely thank and congratulate the entire LWT team, and especially Herman Mayer, the principal, Gary, Michael and Joe, the tutors, and behind the scenes, Karen and Mary, for all the administration organization. These people, and amongst others, have helped build the reputation of LWT, making it one of the most highly regarded watchmaking training schools in the world. Thanks also go to Rolex Watch USA, to Chuck, who, besides his responsibilities here at the school, is also Senior Vice President of Service Operations, and also thanks go to Mark Goldberg, CFO of Rolex Watch USA. And of course, their teams for their invaluable contribution, and without whom we would not be here today. And finally, I would also like to warmly thank all of the members of the LWT Advisory Committee for their active involvement in this training establishment. Rolex Geneva is indeed proud to play a small part in such training activities, as is the case with many other centres around the world dedicated to high-level watchmaker training. For us, this support is key in allowing us to secure the future. We indeed plan to further develop and strengthen our training activities in the field of watchmaking over the coming years, not only to ensure that enough new watchmakers are brought into the industry, but also to defend the image of Swiss watchmaking and quality. It's now time to deliver my annual message to the graduates. It's the same each year, it doesn't change. Things that they all know, but just to be sure, just to remind you. Respect your craft and defend your profession. Always be willing to listen and to learn. Share your knowledge. Don't cut corners. Don't accept to do some substandard work. The devil is in the details, that you know, that you've learned over the last 2 years. Keep your bench tidy and organized. Keep your tools in good condition. Use technical documentation and information as necessary. Polish your reputation. It's a small world. Be truthful, be honest, be realistic, and keep your values at all times. Best wishes to each of you as you embark on your journey into watchmaking, each of you taking a path that will lead you to a currently unknown destination. In closing, may I remind you all that the need for qualified, skilled watchmakers providing the highest levels of service and quality for Swiss watches is not only in America, but also around the world. We are fully confident that the valued reputation of LWT will be upheld and further enhanced by each of our graduates here today over the coming years as their careers develop. In the current climate, we need to remain focused and optimistic, maintain our values, and prepare for the future in a constructive manner. Invest in tomorrow. Our graduates are a part of this future, and each will play their part. All the very best to each of you, and again, warmest congratulations.
Thank you, Mark. And now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, our keynote speaker. He's an LWT graduate from the class of 2007. Before coming to Lidditz, he had already developed a strong interest in collecting vintage wristwatches and eventually buying and selling them. However, he never actually worked on a watch. While he was with us, he was one of the team leaders who were responsible for designing and fabricating the regulator clock that we proudly display in our lobby today. I'm not sure if you saw it, but if you need to stop and see it. It was one of our best classes, and it's you'll hear about it a bit more soon. Upon graduation, Keaton worked for us, Rolex, here in our service facility upstairs. And after about a year, his desire to be closer to his family and further pursue his passion for creative manufacturing led him back home to the Pacific Northwest. He has since established himself in his workshop in Sisters, Oregon, where he restores vintage watches and custom manufactures his own timepieces by hand. This past spring, through one of his professional contacts, he presented one of his prototypes at Basel World, the annual watch fair in Basel, Switzerland. That experience has enabled him to expand his professional network and extend his potential client base on a more international level. We understand that he even went away from Basel with some orders for his product. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my proud pleasure to introduce Mr. Keaton Myrick.
It feels like just a week ago I was sitting there, so it's even that much stranger that I'm up here now. But that's a testament to the industry and what these people do, and that's really good. And I'll start with Basel World. This was an experience that I think is worth hearing because it wasn't as smooth as I think people assume it would be. About a year and a half ago, I was in my workshop installing hands that I just made onto the watch that I was planning on taking. It had been about a year and a half working on that watch between design and this point. In the meantime, doing repairs, restorations to put food on the table, because as my dad says, when I'm working on the watch, it's for the love of the game. There's no money coming in. It was for me. I didn't have it sold. It wasn't assumed. It was for me. I wanted to see if I could do it outside of here. And I did source some components for it, but it was by far and away the most I'd made of a watch compared to the school watch. I had made much more components. And in my shop, I like to have between 5 and 20 days of QC time for my restoration work, for repairs, this sort of thing, to make sure that everything's right, depending on the complexity of the watch and the repairs done, the work done. And my flight was leaving in 10 hours for Switzerland. So I'm putting the hands on, 10 hours to go. I'm not going to have the QC time that I wanted. And it's those moments that you realize why the program here is the way it is. Because you don't always have the luxury of time. And in that specific instance, it paid off. Because over the next 10 hours and then day and a half getting to Switzerland, I'm checking my watch every 15 minutes. I'm pulling it out of my bag. I'm winding it. The click mechanism on this watch is a little bit overly complicated. The design I thought was solid, but you always have to question the idea in the first instance like this. So when you're away from the safety of your workshop, things change. There's no reason to keep checking it. If something's wrong, there's nothing I can do. It's the way it is, but you're always checking it because you're worried. And I get to JFK, and for some reason I have to go through security again. If I don't, I can just do it, get it done as quickly as possible. And I didn't want the watch going through the X-ray machines. I didn't know if they were going to cause magnetism. Magnetism in a watch is a bad deal, so I handed it to the agent to search it. And this is the box. And it's right in that moment that I noticed my first design flaw. There's no up or down. And he slid the watch box open like this, and the watch went straight down. And your heart sinks. And the guy's eyes went huge. And he apologized profusely, and the watch was fine. It landed flat. I was worried about a crystal being broken. I didn't think anything internally was going to break, but it was fine. But that was that first scare. So the next scare was standing in front of the front doors of Basel World. You know, you build things up, especially as a watchmaker, you hear stories. You build things up. You can't build it up enough, this place. There's Maseratis on rotating stands all around you. There's people rushing in either direction. You know, it's mad. And here's me with one watch, standing in there getting ready to walk in. And a tumbleweed could have rolled in front, and I wouldn't have thought twice about it. So I walk in through the front doors, and it hits me that for the last couple years I've been wrong. I really thought I understood the scale of the Swiss watch industry. And I based everything on this assumption. We were really fortunate in my class. We had Antoine Simonet visit, who was in charge of WOSTEP. And he took a day to give us a lecture on the Swiss watch industry. Who owns who, what parts go where, what happens where. Thought I had a grasp on it. There's nothing that can prepare you for the scale of Basel World. These buildings that are marble. The Rolex building that year was marble. And across the hall, Patek Philippe was glass. There's a huge stairway going up into the Rolex. I mean, it's a Rolex building, it's unbelievable. And here's me, with my watch, thinking I've made a huge mistake, because this is too much. So, you can kind of start to see the irony. These people here, this is a sales-oriented and an advertising-oriented get-together. People are there to buy watches. Jewelers are there to buy jewelry. It's pretty humbling. The irony lies in the fact that I wasn't there to sell a watch. I wasn't there to sell any watches. I was there to go get feedback from the watchmakers that I'd looked up to for all this time, that I based all these assumptions on. So it was time to try to find them. Really quickly, an independent watchmaker like me is somebody that operates really with 1 to 15 people under the roof. Now, Rolex is independent, Patek Philippe is independent. On the other scale is me. To give an example, Patek, when they are doing finishing, they have specialty divisions for that. So anglage, flat polishing, and these kind of things are done by specialists. As an independent watchmaker, you have to try to grasp all of those independent fields of watchmaking. Because your product, I found out in Switzerland, your product is going to be held up to theirs. And that's a tough place to be. So in 1984, Sven Anderson and Vincent Calabrese started the AHCI, which is the translation is the Academy of Independent Horological Creators. And it was meant to be this governing body that these two people felt could prove that in this industrial world of watchmaking in Switzerland, the independent world could still exist. Craftsmen in their garages sometimes that have been modified to be workshops, in small workshops independent from their homes, could still succeed. And what they ended up doing was rejuvenating an entire industry. This cottage industry that used to exist at the turn of the century, where watchmakers depended on independent case makers, independent dial makers, independent strap makers, et cetera, and what that ended up leading to was a real deep mutual respect between these cottage industries. And even now, it operates the same way with the independent watchmaking world. And there's a huge amount of respect between all the independents. That's pretty amazing nowadays in such a competitive market. Back to Basel. I headed back to where the AHCI booth was. It's a walk. Back in a darker hall, off in the back, going past all the big brands. I was very lucky because I met a collector there who, of all things, had been following me on Facebook and offered to introduce me to some people. And I was able to sit down with both Laurent Ferrier and Philippe Dufour. And I know these names don't make a difference to a lot of you out there, but for us, these are very big names. Dufour is considered probably the best living watchmaker. He makes what is considered the finest finished watch possibly ever. And to be able to have 15 minutes to sit down with these people to get their feedback, their honest feedback is priceless for somebody like me. You know, I'm not there to get praise, I'm there to get improved. And they understood that. And Dufour said 2 words that meant more to me than anybody ever has. After about 15 minutes of looking at it, he handed it to another watchmaker and said, shrugged his shoulders and said, not bad. This was perfect for me. And we were able to talk for about 5 minutes after that about some areas that needed some improvement. And that's what I'm working on now. So as far as I'm concerned, right there, the trip was worth it. The nice thing was, I ended up selling 2 watches while I was there. Completely obscurely, I wasn't expecting that. So it ended up being a win-win. This really shouldn't be possible for an American watchmaker nowadays. It shouldn't be. It absolutely shouldn't be. There was a time when we had, especially right here in the heart of Lancaster County, we had the watchmaking industry to beat them all. We had Hamilton. And elsewhere in the world, we had Howard and these companies that made amazing watches. Tool watches that had to be used. It's those industries that, and a lot of the achievements that they had that ended up kind of shaping where the Swiss watch industry went, and a lot of the metallurgy and these things that they developed is fascinating. So, Herman, not independently obviously, really is a driving force for fine watchmaking in this country. It's unbelievable what this group of people have done. And I've been to Switzerland, and I've talked to other watchmakers and watch instructors, and I've heard the same thing. I'm confident that without the faculty here, without Rolex's backing, and people like Martin, this would not be possible. They've completely changed the destiny of American watchmaking. And that's something to be immensely proud of, and these guys are the next step in that. And that's something to be really proud of. And that comes with a level of professionalism that's expected. And it starts on day one here. I don't know if a lot of the family members know what these guys went through during their application process, but it's excruciating. And even if you don't get in, you're prepared for any job you're ever going to have. But that process, it's very challenging. 75 applicants on average. So to be sitting there now is a huge achievement. So whether it be Karen and Mary's motherly lookout while we're here, Herman's deep set dedication to the students, Michael's excruciating, relentless demand of perfection, which matches the collectors. We deal with a clientele that knows what they want. And if I wouldn't have had that preparation for that interaction with these collectors, I'm not sure I would have been able to do it. I wouldn't have been able to handle that level of critique. And Gary's ninja wizardry with hairsprings, I make the balance wheel on my watch, which is something a lot of people don't do, and that's the reason why, because he prepared me for that. It's hard to not be inspired every day at school here. It's not a school, it's a place where you can come and be inspired by the people around you. You know, schools have nice equipment and nice things, but it doesn't end there. You've got to have leaders that'll show you passion, that'll show you what it's like to be good at what they do, so you can try to strive for that. And that experience completely changed me. Completely, at my core, it changed me. I came here a kid who was interested in watchmaking, and I left as someone with a deep love and passion for watchmaking, and I knew I wanted to practice it at the highest level that I could for the rest of my life. And that hasn't changed since the day I left. And that's where I guess I'm trying to go. It instilled in me a work ethic and a drive for perfection in my own watches, in my own restoration work, that I wouldn't have received anywhere else. And I've been to other schools. I wouldn't have received it anywhere else but here. I knew immediately it was going to be a lifelong passion from day one. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the word for this industry, passion. If you're passionate about watchmaking and you have LWT behind you, you're good. I'm not saying you can ride the coats of those badges, but it's those two things that are going to make you a great watchmaker. I'm excited to go to work every day. Every day is different. In the restoration world especially, you know, all the watches, every project is completely different. I don't know what I'm going to get. That makes estimating a little interesting, but it works. And that ended up being what I was looking for all along. I had struggled with finding a profession that really spoke to me and really meant something. And it was that challenge, that constant day-to-day struggle of having to be perfect. And that's what watchmaking is. Everything has to be perfect. And that's what I love about it. And that could only lead one place for me, and that was into restoration and a deep fascination and love for high-end watchmaking at the turn of the century and how they did. There's really nothing more humbling than working on a watch from what I consider the golden age of chronometry and watchmaking, which I consider about 1880 to 1960. There was fantastic watches before and after, obviously, and amazing innovations, especially before. But the quantity of fine watches that were being made in that time frame is amazing. So with these watches, you don't get to assume or guess how they did things, what kind of machinery they used. They only had one way to do it: manual machines by hand. And that's humbling. And where I am in Oregon, there's not a lot of watchmakers, so it's easy to get a big head because people tell you you're special. Well, as soon as you dive into a complicated vintage watch, you realize that you're not very special. It's pretty amazing what these people were able to achieve. One quick example, I had a client, and this is something that I thought it was important to share with you guys because it wasn't exactly covered at LWT, and it's something that I found after I left. You know, in an academic environment like this, you are always on a time frame, and everything needs to be done by a certain point. When you're dealing with restoration of expensive, important watches and complicated watches, those time frames it's really important to kind of stretch them out a little bit. And one of those things is I like to work fast, so it's really hard for me to step aside and wait. Because I'll think I have a way of fixing something. I was just talking to Lowry about it. The main plate on this triple date Vacheron that I took in was devastated. Some posts needed to be replaced. Not posts, they were integral parts of the main plate. And a main plate, for you people out there, is integral. The watch, it's the foundation. If you damage it, there's not getting another one, especially for a watch like this. It ended up taking me a month before I actually did the work on the main plate. And it wasn't the first idea I had that I ended up using. And who knows, that first idea might have worked, but it ended up being the third idea I had. And I went through it, everything went flawless, and the watch was returned to the customer right before I left here. He's happy. So there's times when things need to be set aside, and they need to be thought about when you are dealing with an important watch. And if somebody's yelling at you, giving you a deadline, remind them of the value of the watch and the importance of it, unless you have spare parts available. And that's why restoration will always be a part of my business personally. The manufacturing is fun, I love it. But restoration, every watch is a little cheat sheet for a watch designer. We can immediately see the good ideas and the bad ideas and what 50, 75 years of wear did to them. Remember, you don't get to restore the good ideas. Good ideas are fine. It's the bad ideas you have to restore. And a lot of times that's challenging because they weren't that great. And you can put those into your own work, into your own designs that you end up having. So it leads really to two words: micromechanics. In my experience throughout the industry and seeing things in other countries, the competent watchmaker always has a foundation in micromechanics. That's not to say that dynamic poising isn't important. It's very important. And you're using micromechanics when you're doing it, even if you don't think you are. Everything you do in watchmaking is micromechanics. How much force it takes to break the pivot. How much force it takes. You know from making pivots how much force it takes. So even in a service center environment, you are using micromechanics every day. Don't forget that, because I hear a lot of people say, gosh, I wish I could use micromechanics more. I wish micromechanics was part of my job. I love that. And it is part of your job. So take all that stuff that you learned in first year, remember that whether you're filing a part out by hand or dynamic poising a Rolex, you're using micromechanics. And that's one of the reasons the school is so special. I struggled a little bit on whether or not to share this next little part, but I felt it really important because I wasn't told all this stuff. So I think it's important that they hear it. And it's a little bit more personal stuff about my business. I have a pretty humble shop. It's not that over the top, you know. It's